chatting and talking shop. We are live. It is the second day of March 2020. I am joined by my guest today, Brian Golod. Welcome to the podcast live, my man. How you doing?
Amazing. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. And you're up in Toronto, right?
I am in Toronto. I've been here for 11 years and I've been in Canada for 16 years. I love this country so much.
That's awesome. I'm a huge fan. And I think I told you this before. I went to school up in Buffalo, so I spent a lot of time up in Toronto. Absolute big fan. Well, it's awesome. Today's it's March. I can't believe it's March already. And it's funny. Yesterday was my birthday, which is awesome because I always feel that after my birthday, spring finally comes, right? But we've had a weird winter here in New York. Not a lot of snow. What's happening up in Toronto weather-wise? You still get dumped on?
Yes, we do. First of all, happy belated birthday.
Thanks,
I didn't even know. So, yeah, hope you enjoyed it with your family and friends. Weather here is a little bit wet, overcast, but there has been a lot of snow. So, I don't know. People talk about global warming. We're freezing.
It's a lake effect. So I know that your time is limited today, so we'll certainly jump in here. Give me 1 second. I'm loading up the show here. Let's make sure we got some critical mass. We got a bunch of people joining in. We got some people chiming in from all over the country. Adam Sinkus, who will join us in a little bit. We're going to take a look at his resume. But let me just lower the volume here. But let's just talk shop for a minute here. What you've done in the last couple of months on LinkedIn has been incredible, adding so much value and helping folks out there. But let's just kind of level set everybody. Give us a quick overview of your background, because you're not a recruiter. You don't work in HR. You're not in talent acquisition. But how did you come into this world of providing so much value around resumes and career stuff?
I guess I realized that there was a lot of need for this on LinkedIn. I noticed, I'm very observant. I realized that there's a big demand for people who are lost. They don't know how to get into their next interview, how to crack their interviews or negotiate for their compensation. And I thought, I know how to do that. But it was all a fluke. To make it very, very short, when I first started on LinkedIn, I started to post articles. One person from South Africa who lives in South Africa, he reached out to me and he said, Brian, can you help me with my next interview? I said, when is it? And he said, I don't have one yet. I said, okay, whenever you have one, let me know. 2 days later, he came back and he said, I have an interview tomorrow. I said, congratulations, that's great. Can I help you? And he said, do you know anything about logistics? I said, I don't know anything about logistics. However, I know how to interview really well. I found out that he was unemployed for 2 years. And I mentored him for 35 minutes. The next day, he became the right hand of the CEO of a multinational. And then I thought to myself, it took two weeks until he got the confirmation, of course.
Right.
And then this happened, interestingly enough, it happened on the day of the passing of my dad. May he rest in peace. So for me, that was, thank you very much. For me, that was a sign. I was like, maybe there is a message behind this. Maybe I need to look further into this. And then I started to look for more people who needed my guidance or anybody's guidance, but I wanted to find more people. And then I started to reach out to them, mentor them one-on-one, in person, over Skype or Zoom or whatever. And every single one that I was mentoring, they managed to get back on their feet. Whether they were newcomers, people across the world, it didn't matter. And then I thought to myself, it cannot be a coincidence. If I do it once, maybe, but if I do it 10 times and every single person, I managed to get them back on their feet on their very next interview.
Something's working here. Something's working.
Right. And then I started to dig further into it because the emotion behind it, when you help someone get back on their feet and provide to themselves and their families, give them that confidence that they were lacking before, that feeling is priceless. I cannot compare it to anything else. So I wanted more of it. So it became kind of like an addiction. It's like the more I help, the more I want to help.
I love it, man. So let's backtrack for a minute too, because I want to talk about how you gained experience and the insight and knowledge on the resume and the career stuff. And it's from your own personal experiences. And there's a bunch of people on LinkedIn too, where yes, it helps if you're a professional like myself who looks at a million resumes a day and understands the system inside out too. But job seekers who have had success, there's a huge value there as well, because something obviously worked for you. So let's just kind of level set everybody. What is your 9-to-5 job? What do you do for a living?
So I've been in IT since I was 13 years old. I am 36 now. So I've been in IT for 23 years, different roles and responsibilities. That's what I do. I'm a product owner. I am leading a software development team. and providing services to a very large organization that is worldwide. So I keep that, to the side. That's not what I do on LinkedIn. On LinkedIn, I realized that there is a need for something else, to be able to empower and inspire professionals who are struggling. So yeah, on 9 to 5, I do what I love, what I've trained for, what I've studied. My whole experience is around IT. And then LinkedIn, I do it to empower and inspire other people, other professionals around the world. And then the other thing that I'm doing is I'm helping people immigrate to Canada as well. So I realize that there are a lot of people who want to move to this amazing country.
It's tough, especially with, especially coming from the US and back the other way too with the new administration. It's tough. It used to be very easy where literally you just had to go to the border with your T1, I think it is, and you could roll up to the border and show your proof of employment, and they'd let you in, one way or another. So I want to talk about how you coach for a minute with candidates, and well, I call them candidates, you call them clients. What is your process? And we're going to do for everyone watching, we're going to do a live resume review in a little bit. But what's your process in understanding, a candidate's background, not just looking at their resume, but understanding their career journey and what they're going and their motivation and what they're looking to do? Tell us a little bit about your process. How deep do you go?
Okay, just so you know, I also call them candidates. I don't look at people like clients. I look at them as people who are struggling.
Great. I love it.
So I've identified that a couple of questions, maybe 3 questions really, I should say 4. 4 questions really help me understand what it is that they're struggling with. The first one is, do you manage to, a lot of people reach out to me and they tell me, I need help. They don't give me enough information. So I have 4 questions. The first one is, do you manage to get interviews on your own? If you don't, then maybe your resume or your CV is the problem, right? No, they tell me, I can actually get interviews on my own. Okay, great. So maybe that's not a problem. A lot of candidates think that the resume might be a problem or their CV might be a problem, but if they are getting the interviews, it's not the resume or the CV.
Correct.
At that moment, once you are through the door, the resume or the CV doesn't matter anymore.
Right, it's you. It's how you interview.
Correct. So when they tell me that they managed to get those interviews and they're not getting the offers or they're being ghosted, which, by the way, I highly advise everybody to stop ghosting. Should not do that. It takes 1 second to just give closure to the person to allow them to move on. So,
correct.
Whenever they tell me that they are getting the interviews but they're not getting the offers, then I realize, okay, then it's your interview skills. There's nothing else. If you manage to capture their attention and you manage to get to that interview, then it is your interview skills.
So, I agree with you on that point.
And then there are some other candidates who say, I managed to get the offers, but they're not good enough, right? My compensation is not what I should be getting for my skills, knowledge, experience, and expertise. So then I help them with their negotiation skills. The one story that helped me take off on LinkedIn, and this was, let's say 6 months ago or so, was when I shared that there was this graphic designer who was being paid $90,000 a year here in Canada. And I helped her jump from $90,000 to $160,000 in 1 week. So I mentored her, I taught her how to negotiate, and she went from $90,000 to $160,000.
And what was the key takeaway there? How did you? Because it's also very important to tell people that that's an anomaly, right? If you're in a career track, like the average increase, and I'm talking specifically for New York City, people think you're going to get huge raises, and yes, it happens, and you have a success story. But the average raise is anywhere from 12 to 15%. I mean, this is factual. It goes if you're going from one level to the next. But in your case, and I want to hear a little bit more detail, I assume that she was grossly underpaid, and you help her get to a level where she should be at.
It's a combination of a couple of things, and I wish I had known these before. I am right now a consultant, right? So I'm a contractor. What I learned about 2 years ago when the government of Canada came to grab me, to take me for a government job here or career opportunity, is that if you're a contractor or a consultant, you can get paid significantly more. You're taking a risk, of course, because they can let you go anytime, right?
Of course.
You're not getting any benefits. So here in Canada, you get the benefits, vacation and health insurance and so on and so forth. But I am blessed to have my wife, and I get the benefits, the health benefits through her. So one of the things that I suggested to this good friend of mine was, now she's a good friend of mine, I suggested, why don't you switch from a full-time position to a consultant position? And I said, look, there's a big risk, so I want you to understand all these risks associated with making such a change. But if you can tolerate the risks, there might be a lot of money on the other side. And she went for it.
Yeah.
And then I taught her how to negotiate. The recruiter who was representing her was trying to squeeze her really badly, like was trying to, nickel and dime with her. And I was like, be patient. She was about to drop it a few different times. I was like, wait a second, don't drop it. Don't just
play it out.
Play it out. See how it turns out. Don't get all desperate about this, and just play it out and see. You don't have anything to lose anyway because you have your career opportunity where you've been.
The worst they could say is no, right? You could push for it. Yeah.
And so patience really works, really helps.
In most cases, absolutely. But one important thing, and I talk a lot about it in the process as a recruiter who represents companies, and I also do contingency recruiting. I have that salary conversation the first call with anybody, right? Because Brian, I don't want to get to the end of it and then we're 60 grand off, and I have a candidate asking for 60 grand more. And I said, hey, listen, we have a budget. Companies have budgets too. But on the flip side of it, and I completely agree with you here, a lot of people don't have the confidence or the experience, and they don't know those tactics. So I 100% agree with you. I want to talk a little bit about your ATS template because we're going to jump in here in a little bit. Talk to us about, because it's a very, I went through your whole process. I went through your whole flow there. It's a very simple and clean and logical template. And a couple of things I want to clear up. A lot of people think when people say ATS that there's a robot out there that is literally scanning every resume and not letting it get through to the gatekeeper. That is not true, because I look at resumes all day long. There are human beings on the other end of an ATS is just applicant tracking system. It is a database where people apply and then it goes through the system and people can review it on the other side. Now, as a recruiter, my database gives me access to search templates. Let's say, for example, it's a tech job and I'm looking for Python or C+ or R or whatever. I could search by keyword. So to your point on your template, one of the pieces I like is making sure that your keywords are relevant. And I think that the key to any successful resume or job search, it starts with relevancy, right? It starts with getting that attention, right? And putting that resume to be in the best place for success. So let's take it up a notch before we get too technical with your resume. What's the core, your approach to resumes and how they can be most effective?
The first thing that I would say to people, I don't know if you will agree with this or not, but the first thing will be stop customizing your resume for every single position that you apply to. I'll tell you why, the logic behind it. While you're customizing your resume, which will take you somewhere between half an hour to 2, 3, 4 hours to that specific job description or career opportunity that you came across, there are another 50 people who applied, and you were on your computer, or you waited until the evening to customize it, and then you're on the 51st position on the list. So if you want to have more success even, be the first one to apply. So whenever you're looking for an opportunity, let's say that, so right now I am a product owner, as I was mentioning, in the technology field. I will look at 10 different, or whatever the number might be, 10 different career opportunities and see what the similarities and commonalities are between all of them, what keywords I need to use, what responsibilities, what the role entails. And then I will craft one resume that is tailored to the role, not to that particular organization. So when I look at 10 different organizations and the 10 different things that they are looking for, then I come up with one resume that is tailored, generic enough, specific enough to that role that I'm applying for. Does it make sense?
I agree with you on the fact that you want to personalize for the role. You don't have to personalize for the company. That could be addressed in a cover letter. And we're not talking about cover letters right now. We're strictly talking about resumes. So I want to stay on track there for a little bit too. Interesting point, because I'm on the other side. I look at resumes all day long. And here's a little pull back the curtain thing. I'm coming in and out of jobs that I'm working, right? So someone could apply 2 weeks ago and I'm looking at all those resumes, but if it's a very popular job, right, it could go to the bottom of that list. So there is some validity to that point, but it also really matters when the recruiter on the other side is reviewing resumes. I certainly want to talk about that. So let's jump in. So Brian's resume template generated, what's the number right now? How many downloads, how many views?
So about
Roughly,
70,000 downloads and 4.7 million views.
Got it. And it's a pretty interesting process too. And I went through your flow here too. I have an important question here. What is, because you're not just giving away the template, which is awesome there, but you're also bringing people into, let me get this correct. Is there like a course or training? And there's nothing wrong with that. It's totally cool. But I want to understand, what is your end game here? I know that you want to provide value and help people, but is this a side hustle for you? Are you building workshops and classes? How are you continuing to build your business?
So I didn't think about it as a business. Basically, I'll tell you a little bit of background when this happened, what triggered it in my head, and or actually my heart more than my head. So I was sitting next to my grandma in Argentina. I flew down to Argentina to be next to my grandma while she was doing her first chemo session. I promised to myself that if she ever needed me, that I would be next to her. So I was sitting right next to her. Thank you. I'm the oldest. My dad passed away. My uncle passed away. My grandfather passed away. So I wanted to be there next to her to support her. I was sitting right next to her, and I was like, sure, I am monetizing this. I'm monetizing a whole bunch of different services that I offer, but there are a lot of people across the world who cannot get a single interview, right? And I thought to myself, if that was my case, I have 2 children, almost 3-year-old daughter and a 3-month-old son. If that was my case, I would die if I cannot provide to my family.
Yeah, of course.
Children, right? So I thought to myself, okay, I know how to make money. I am making money on the side. But does making money on the side, is that more important than actually helping other human beings? Whether I know them or not, whether it brings me more money or not, I can't care less. So it was out of my heart, really. I was like, okay, I'm going to just post it. I'm going to give it away. And I prepared the template. I gave all the instructions. And the whole point was not to bring people so that they tell me, oh, I got the template, but I don't know how to fill it out. Of course, there are many people who don't know how to write, and I can't write it for them. I mean, I can, but that's a service. But the whole point was to give them as much information as I could, as much guidance as possible. So I just I packaged it up for the sole purpose of just giving value so that people could start to get interviews.
I love it.
And a lot of people are messaging me on a daily basis saying, Brian, could not get interviews for months. And then I tried your template, and in one day I got an interview. So
yeah,
mission accomplished, I guess, for me. That's it.
That's awesome too, and you're really certainly building something here, and you know what, you're using the platform wisely. You're figuring out how to generate leads for it, which is a whole separate thing too. So let's get to the heart. Let's get to the point of today. We're going to bring in a guy by the name of Adam Sinkis, and we're going to talk to him a little bit about his career, what he's up to in his journey. Let's bring him in. Let's get this. Adam, welcome. How's it going, man?
Hey, what's going on, guys? Appreciate you having me on.
Awesome. Welcome to the podcast live. So Adam, why don't you give us a quick high-level elevator pitch? Tell us where you are, who you are, what you do best, where you're at in your career, and what your challenges are right now. It's a lot.
Yeah.
Man.
Hey, hopefully I won't forget anything, right? So
I'll keep you honest, man.
So where I'm at, I'm in Fort Myers, Florida. It's an interesting area because there is this stigma. They want to bring big business into this area, but it's, notoriously it's a snowbird and just travel heavy place. So it's been a challenging space in the job hunting world. But for my background, I've spent several years in the BPO industry and call centers. Doing training, operations management, team leadership, quality. So I kind of spent the gambit of learning a big sector of, pretty much everything across call centers from an operational standpoint. Most recently, I was a training manager over a 600-seat call center. Managed 6 different operational programs from a training perspective. And making sure that we're having training completed on time and effectively. So outside of that, big challenges, like I said, really is location. And unfortunately, I'm just not in a position where relocating makes a ton of sense for me.
Well, that was one of my questions. So are you currently employed right now?
I am not. So I've taken my side hustle and spent some time making that my main hustle in between things here. So recently was let go just due to corporate cutbacks and restructuring, which is commonplace in the BPO industry. So
a couple of questions so we can really best help you before I hand it over to Brian here to do his thing. Do you want to stay in the same industry?
I'm pretty open on industry. I really love driving operations in itself. From just get in nitty gritty. Let's solve problems. Let's create efficient processes, things like that. I also love training as well. Why I've kind of split the gambit here is that I find there's a lot of challenges in the training world because they tend to be a little more specialized roles, where I can get into an operations level role and be a little bit broader in scope.
Got it. Interesting. And where are you at in your process? I mean, are you submitting? Is there a good job market in Florida over there, or are you getting calls back? I mean, I'm sure Brian would ask this next question. What's your current response? What's working? What's not working? And where do you feel you're hitting the wall?
I think the biggest thing, so response-wise, I've gotten an okay response, not as much as I'd like, but most of the response I've gotten has been, significantly undervalued for, the roles that I've had in the past and where I need to be, financially is the big one, and that's a challenge in the BPO industry. I find as a whole. They tend to be very constrained to what the contracts are written for. So,
let me ask you a question. When do you find out that you are highly undervalued? Is it near the end of the process, at the beginning? Do you find that you're wasting your time?
It's been a mix. It's definitely been a mix. I find more companies now are starting to be a lot more upfront with it. But there's still some of the smaller companies still in that older practice of, let's take you through the process here. And, so I typically, if I haven't heard by the second phone call what money we're talking about, I'll ask the question because I don't want to waste my time either.
Are you finding, and I'm just doing a little bit of market research here, are the recruiters that you're talking to having that compensation conversation the first call?
70% of the time, I would say.
And do you feel comfortable answering the question? Not live, not right now, okay? But do you feel comfortable when they ask you? Do you feel confident that what you're asking for is fair to the industry, to the market?
Yeah, no, I definitely feel the value that I'm asking for is fair. I've heard the feedback that what you're asking for based on your experience is totally acceptable. We just are at and they provide that kind of top dollar amount.
How big is the difference, percentage-wise?
I mean, we're talking probably 10 to 20 grand difference.
I was hoping that you would tell me percentage-wise, so that we wouldn't have to disclose it.
Yeah, no, probably. I'm doing the math in my head, and it's hurting this afternoon.
Monday morning math.
Like 25% or more like 10%? Or
I would say 25%. Yeah, it's a pretty significant number.
Here's the thing. At this moment, maybe it's a different subject, but at this moment, I see that if you're hurting to find an opportunity, and how long has it been since you've been unemployed?
It's been like 3.5 weeks. So
okay, still early on.
Yeah, we're still early.
Savings, you have a way to provide to yourself and maybe your loved ones as well.
Yeah, that's why I'm doing the side hustle stuff right now, and that's and I have it's making ends meet, and I have the cushion there, so I'm comfortable at the moment. That's why I'm really focused on finding the right opportunity, not just jumping into something.
And that's amazing. That's amazing. That's very important. At the same time, keep in mind that you don't want to be out of it for too long because then you start to question. So my advice is, a lot of people always reach out to me and they say, Brian, I just want to quit, right? But they don't realize that there are so many people who would die to have an opportunity and to have to put up with that micromanager, with their colleagues who bully them, with whatever it is. Of course, bullying is not acceptable, but there are many situations, long commute, underpay, you name it, right? But there are so many people who cannot even provide to themselves or their families, and they're going through such big trouble. So my advice to anyone is watch out for how long it might take you to get back on your feet, quote unquote. It's
you have to be mindful.
Get back in the game, because when you're back in the game, then you have the control, because then you can go to the next. If you were backstage listening to what I was saying before, when you go to the next interview, let's say 6 months down the road, a year or two, then you have control, and it doesn't matter really what happens at that interview. You go back to the previous one because you are employed at that moment. So you go with a different level of confidence. I don't want to bring you down and question your confidence right now, but when you go without anything, it's like you're going to go and fight without any weapons. It's like,
Yeah.
you can attack me, you can bring me down, you can. Of course, it doesn't mean that you have to accept them, because you don't necessarily want to work for those kinds of people, but you also want to get back in the game, right? So as much as you don't want to be underpaid, you want to have something so that you can go and negotiate for the next one later.
Absolutely. Let's shift gears for a moment here, and let's talk about your resume. I mean, generally speaking, how do you feel, without even pulling your resume up right now? Do you feel good about your resume? Do you feel like it's opening up doors for you? Do you think that there's anything you need to improve on? Before we pull it up here and take a look at it, I want to get your gut feeling on your resume.
So overall, I feel like it's relatively solid. It was interesting, Brian. You said design your resume for the role, not for the position.
I'm going to bring it up while we're talking.
And that's something I have focused on. So I have kind of a core resume that has skills that fit in both buckets that I do focus on, and then I clean up the skill section for for that position specifically to target. So, but overall, I feel like it's a fairly decent resume, and I feel like it's action oriented and drives a decent response. So, but I'm curious to hear your thoughts, Brian.
Okay, let's take a look.
Let's see if that is working. This is my first screen share, so I had to close down my application. Do you guys just see the resume?
Yep.
Yeah, I want to see it much bigger because it's
Hold on.
small. Oh, okay, perfect. Awesome.
Hold on. Tell me when to scroll down here. So I'm doing a crazy. Wow, the screen share thing is fun. It's like an infinity mirror, right? And then now I have it open here. So I'm trying to watch it on my phone. So I'm gonna let you guys talk. Now we have it open. I'm delayed there. I made it bigger. So let's just take a second and take a look here. Brian, I'm very curious on your point of view when people list skills at the top. And I know it's a little bit different industry by industry, because in my opinion, if you're in a tech or any type of field where there's certain specific skills that need to be listed, it's okay to put it in the top section here. But what are your thoughts there overall, Brian?
So I will remove that. You're not helping yourself. Did you use a table by any chance, or you're just using tab to be able to move across the different
columns? Section breaking columns, yep.
So I would not use columns, because you need to tailor or cater to every single ATS software out there, and you don't know how it's going to interpret your document. So what I would do instead is move this section. First of all, from what I've heard and what I've experienced, is that hiring managers want to go straight to your experience. They want to see what your day-to-day was. So you want to take these skills and move them all the way to the bottom.
Okay.
We can go in detail as to where, but you also want to list them side by side, comma delimited. As you know, any type of document out there that needs to be interpreted, let's say by Excel, for example, if you list things comma delimited, it's going to be able to pick up each one of those items, right? In this case, it doesn't know what the tabulation is or where that item ends.
Okay.
So my advice is remove that skill section and put it at the bottom and list them side by side, comma delimited. The one thing that you can do so that it looks very nice, very neat, is that you can select on the alignment, the text alignment, you can select justify. So not left, not center, not right. Select justify. So it will expand everything all the way to the end. And then you can play with all your different skills so that each line touches the very end and it looks very nice. Don't finish your last line with one skill that is just hanging out there by itself. Sometimes if you move that item to maybe 3 lines up, you can play with those items with the length of each one of those so that each one of those lines that you are trying to cover is fully maximized. And then this last thing that I just mentioned applies to throughout your entire resume. So when you have your bullet points, let's say that you were the type of person, I mean, you have here 1, 2, 3 different lines, right? Try to maximize the last line where you're within a bullet point. Maximize it. Don't finish that line with 1, 2, 3 words. If you're writing, you may as well just take the whole line, as much as you can, of course.
Yeah, I think you're also, to Brian's point, you're not utilizing the space here. And Brian, let's just double back for a minute here. What are your thoughts on summary sections?
Let me take a look.
At the top here, let me make it a little bit. There you go.
Thank you very much. So
Go for it.
I would expand a little bit more, and I would say exactly what it is that you're actually looking for. I know here you're saying ready to develop tailored approaches, but I don't want to see a section that says objective, but I want to see at least your last sentence within your summary. I want to see what it is that actually you're passionate about. Now, if, as you were mentioning earlier, you're actually quite concerned about the opportunity that comes your way. You don't just want to take anything. So you need to think for yourself first what it is that you're looking for. Then you need to put it on paper, and then they need to see whether it is going to help you grow in your career. And if there is a match, then you're going to be brought into that interview. So
Got
your
it.
very last sentence could just do that, right? I am looking.
Yep.
You can say looking for blah blah blah.
Okay.
Let's talk about the work experience. Let's move it down here a little bit. You're only in Florida. I mean, in my experience, I like to see where the locations are that people are working. But if you're only in one state, if you've only been in one location, I think it's kind of okay to not have it on there. Brian, what are your thoughts on location clarification for each specific job?
I would add it because then the hiring manager or the human resources specialist doesn't have to wonder where this was. A lot of people leave it out, and you're like, where did it happen? Especially with a lot of people applying from overseas or wherever it is. Of course, your name might give away that you are local, right?
Yeah.
But you don't want to leave anything for interpretation. So
That is a very good point, Brian. I really like that too, and I didn't mean to cut you off there, but I think that you hit on a very important point when it comes to all resumes is not leaving things up to interpretation. Because as a recruiter, we only have a few seconds to review each resume, right? I mean, and then before we decide to dig in a little bit. So if we have any bias, any doubt, any questions at all, if you could remove that up front by simply doing some basic things on your resume, that's a spot on point, Brian. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And the thing with you, Adam, is that you're looking for a career opportunity in Fort Myers, right? So since you're so specific and your experience might have happened in Fort Myers, make sure that you stand out because there might be a lot of people who are applying from New York or from Kansas City or wherever it is. So
Great point.
For a recruiter, for a hiring manager, they will realize, oh, this guy is local. We can bring him in for an interview. He doesn't have to relocate. We don't have to pay for a relocation package. All those things will play to your advantage. So make sure that they know.
Yeah.
Right.
Cool.
The other thing is that is catching my eye is the date formats. Sure, you can argue that maybe the ATS is going to interpret it correctly. What I would change it to, so that the person doesn't have to process what this is, just change the month to the 3-letter abbreviation of the actual month. So 08, you would say AUG. I put it in uppercase, and then space, and then the year. And I leave it at that. But very, very easy for them to not have to process. A lot of people don't know what's month 5. Like they are trying to figure out, did he have a gap? Did he not?
It also looks better too. Visually.
Yeah, it looks better. Yeah.
Got it. So let's dig into his most recent role here at Link Services. Optics. Let's take a look at it just from a formatting perspective before we look at the content. Brian, what are your thoughts on? I've seen this before when people kind of have a summary and then a couple of bullet points underneath. What's your overall approach here?
I wouldn't personally do it. I've seen tremendous success with not doing it. People want to go to the day-to-day, what you've done, right? And I would make the bullet points shorter. I would not go into the third line for a bullet point. I would keep it maximum of 2. I've had personally tremendous success with my writing on LinkedIn. I don't know if you've seen, Adam, my writing, but I do double spacing, and every single one of my sentences is a one-liner. Okay, a lot of people might say, you know what, you're gaming the system. Why are you doing that, right? It doesn't matter why you do it, but the main reason behind it is I want anybody to be able to interpret my content and understand it across the world. I don't control who's going to consume my content, so I want to make sure that someone in Nigeria, in India, in Bangladesh, in South America, that they can understand it. Of course, here it is someone more advanced in their English understanding, right? So you're applying, and the hiring manager or human resources person is looking at your resume. At the same time, people don't have much attention span these days. So if you give them a massive paragraph, they're not going to follow and they're going to get lost. So that's why I keep my bullet points very, very short. So one piece of advice that I have is, you see how you finish that intro on Link Services? It says excellence on the last line. I would not do that. Either you take the whole line or you don't take it at all.
Okay.
Right? The second one is I would actually not have that description there. I would break it into bullet points. Right? Turn it into actionable things that you've done for the organization and how you provided value to them. Make it tangible. Make sure that they see numbers, they see your contribution to the organization. And the third one is you can actually play with how do you call this thing? When you have the bullet points and you can adjust the margins, I guess, from the
the
top on the
spacing.
ruler.
You could left justify it.
So you can bring the bullet points all the way to, see where it says launched a training program, where the L is, you can bring the bullet point all the way to the far left so that you're saving space. And then you can bring the B much closer to the bullet point so you start to save horizontal space as well.
It gives you more real estate to work.
Correct. So be creative with not using anything that will break the ATS, but will help you adjust your resume to be able to fit in more content. Now, you see how you have, sorry, Adam, you see how you have business strategy, and then you have a sentence, and then dot or period, and then used SMEs. You can potentially break that down into multiple bullet points. So anytime that I see someone having a semicolon or a period, that's a great opportunity to break it into another bullet point. Because you're going to end up using the exact same real estate, but for the person reading and consuming your content, they will be like, oh, that's much easier to follow, right? It's just one sentence. It doesn't take very long, 3 seconds to read, as opposed to reading a 3-line sentence that it's like, what did he say?
That is a really good point there, and it also makes it more digestible for the reader too. If I'm looking at this, there's too much information there, and you have 3 really good points in your first thing that you could break up. I do like how that you're having actionable results. I think it's called the STAR method, where you're showing your action and your result and what it actually did. Right, you're putting hard numbers to it. These aren't hypotheticals; these are real results. Now, Brian, what are your thoughts here? Like, I don't know what OJT means, but I also don't recruit in this space. Is that a technical jargon? Is that something that you would spell out, or does it, like, are you assuming that if you're in a specific industry and there's technical abbreviations that it's perfectly fine?
If he's applying within his same industry, then it's great to use the abbreviations, as long as he understands that the person in human resources and the hiring manager will understand it. If it is very specific to that organization and it's uncommon, then I would not do that. But the other thing is catching my attention is the bolding of this business strategy, communications, and there's some other bolding, 20%, Sigma methodology. That is underestimating the reader. I mean, if someone is in the position of hiring you, don't think that they cannot dissect your content, right?
Yeah.
I see a lot of people from the Asian side of the world bolding every second or third word. I'm like, these people
terrible.
know how to dissect your content. So don't try to do anything to make it stand out. Just make sure that your content is legible and it's clear, concise, and they will be able to understand it.
That is a really, really good point here. Now, Brian, what are your thoughts when somebody is either left a job or they got let go, of somehow getting ahead of the hiring manager's question, asking why they got let go? For example, if Adam put in here, I'm paraphrasing here, but was downsized in February 2020 due to a reduction in force. What are your thoughts on adding in content about why you're not currently at a job?
I've never had any of the candidates that I've helped who needed to put that on their resumes. I think that you're potentially opening the door for, you're opening the door to a lot more questions that they may not have asked you to begin with. You want to bring yourself into that interview. When you're stating the date there, you're saying from August 2019 to February 2020. This is the reason why I'm saying act on it as quickly as possible, right? Because you don't want to be applying with this same resume in May of 2020, and now you have a 3-month gap. So you have to action on it. I would not. Nobody wants to be in this position. Let's be realistic about that. Nobody wants to be unemployed. So why open the door to that? I would wait until you are in the interview and they ask you, and be truthful about it, right? And you can say exactly what it is and be vulnerable about it and just share that. But at the same time, you have to have the confidence that they need to hear from you, that you can deliver value to them, that you know what you're doing, and that it was just unfortunate.
Got it. So taking a look at the resume here, I'm a big fan of someone who reviews resumes. I don't care if you have a PhD, your first job out of school. I do not like to see more than 2-page resumes. It's too much for me to read. I believe in brevity. I believe that you could get everything you can out there, unless you're a published PhD and you're talking about different, publications out there. Brian, do you agree with that, or you say to people, hey, write as much as you need to?
I tell people don't go beyond the second page if you don't need to. Interestingly enough, my personal resume is 3 pages long. I have a really hard time dropping any of my previous career opportunities because I have so much love for what I do that I want to showcase everything. Now, I'm not going to showcase when I was working at the call center, not in the same capacity as you, Adam, but when I was picking up phone calls at the call center. That doesn't belong to my resume, right? But as long as my previous career opportunities were related and added value to my experience, to who I am today, I am doing it. My personal experience is that my resume has been picked up just as much as when I have 2 pages, as much as when I have 3 pages. Now, if you don't have to go into the 3rd page, don't go into it. Now, one mistake that I see, common mistake that I see, is people starting with an experience. Two things I'm going to say. The first one is starting with an experience at the bottom of the page, and they go into the 3rd bullet point, and then on the next page, then they have the 4th bullet point, and the 5th one, 6th one, 7th one, right? And now the person reading this experience, they have to flip back and forth between one page and the other to see what this experience belonged to. So what I will say is always start at the top of the page with a brand new experience, with a brand new section, okay? So by section, I don't mean start with career experience or past jobs or whatever you're naming it. Start with a subsection if you need to, but at the top of the page. Don't continue with the previous one. And the second thing that I want to say is if you are going to go into the 3rd page because you have to, don't use it just to go 4 lines into the 3rd page. Either you make the most of that 3rd page or don't go into that 3rd page at all. I see a lot of people going like 2 lines and then it says references available upon request, which by the way, nowadays you don't have to either. So you can save on that.
Let's talk for a second about a 2nd page here because I see something interesting. It looks like you were at, and correct me if I'm wrong here, maybe I'm reading this differently. It looks like you were at Concentrix for a long time. It looks like you were there for 7 years and you had a number of different jobs. It shows your progression here. Brian, how would you suggest somebody, because for me, like if I'm eyeballing this quickly, it looks like you were at different jobs here, and it takes me an extra second to realize that these were different titles and a progression here. Brian, how do you treat a resume where someone's been in a job for a while and they've grown, they've been promoted, but there's been different skill sets within each one of those positions?
It's interesting. Here, what I would do is, there are 2 approaches, and you have to try both, I guess. One is to actually split it up into 2. And the person who's reading your resume is going to be able to see, okay, this is at the same organization. There was no gap in between. You see one and you see the other. The other option is to do similar to what you're doing here. You have the dates when each one of these roles or responsibilities took effect and when you started them. I don't see a major problem with this or challenge with this. If you were to put these dates on the other side, then you would have multiple dates coming across, right? At the same time, a lot of people like to see consistency. They will be like, why did you put that there and you put this other one here? I don't know if there is a real right way to write this. Adam, maybe you have seen this and you want to chime in more.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen it also where, like, at the top you have your job title here, and then under technical training manager, you would list those other positions that you have with the date frames, and then you would have maybe, I'm just saying hypothetically, 4 to 7 bullets that kind of summarize all of your experience within this company, just to kind of make it a little bit more succinct here. But you were there for a long time. There's certainly a few different ways to show job progression. I do not think that this is optimal right here. In any way, kind of throws me off a bit, and I think you could come up with a little bit more real estate. So just to keep things moving here, let's talk about accomplishments. It's a pretty broad title, accomplishments. You're talking about some other things that you have extracurricular. Brian, what are your thoughts on accomplishments? How do you treat them?
You would want to see also the dates when you accomplish those, right? Similar to your studies, you want to make sure that, I mean, for someone looking at this, did this happen 10 years ago or did it just happen? So you want to state not necessarily the month of the year, but at least the year. So it's easier for the person to be like, oh, this just happened. What is it about, right? Now, because you have the dates on the right-hand side of your resume, you may want to put the dates on the right-hand side of the resume. So you can put 2019, 2018, 2017.
Got it. That helps. And education here. I mean, there's some schools of thought, depending where you are in your career, that education should be closer to the top of the resume for certain jobs, for certain levels. Brian, what are your thoughts on where education should go and how should it be formatted on a resume?
So I would put it at the very end. Always put it at the end. The way that you want it is you want your title, whatever it is that you were getting, your bachelor, your master's, your PhD, whatever it is that you were studying, or whatever certificate it is that you got. And then you want the institution, and you want the location where you got that from, and you want the year in which you finished. So you don't necessarily have to say the year from which year until which year you were studying. If you're running out of space, you don't have enough space, you can just put the year in which you graduated from each one of those specialties.
Awesome. That's fantastic here. And any last, I want to wrap it up here. Brian, any last thought on Adam's resume here?
It's not as bad as I've seen. I love that it doesn't have anything visual, anything colorful. Your content is really speaking for you, for your experience. So you're on the right track. A lot of people try to show, well, if you're in the States, a photo doesn't belong to a resume, right? So I've seen a lot of people putting a photo on a resume. There are a lot of other people who leverage fancy templates that they download from who knows where. You don't want to do those either because they will break the ATS. So your format is spot on. I shared with you here backstage, I shared the link to my free ATS resume template, which has worked for thousands of people. And you can see, I mean, there's a lot of guidance there. You can see how you can turn this one into an ATS resume template. I've seen also issues with links. I've noticed that you have a couple of links here, especially with your publication, but you didn't have it on your email address at the very top, for example. So you can be consistent. Either you use links or you don't. If you're trying to make the life easier of the person reading your resume, put the links. At the same time, I've heard a lot about ATS breaking when you use links. So I wouldn't put a link.
Links are tough too. I also like when people, I like when people have their LinkedIn tag at the top, because there's a lot of common names out there. And I will tell you, this is a recruiter. Anyone that I'm interested in looking at past their resume, the next thing I'm going to do is pull up their LinkedIn. And I think it's very important that your chronological order on LinkedIn matches your resume. If I see a discrepancy there, I'm going to call it out. And some people aren't as active as we are. Listen, Brian and I are freaking super user LinkedIn junkies, right? So we're on LinkedIn all the time, and we're very conscious about the optics of our LinkedIn and the chronological order of it. But anybody, if you're starting a job search, if you're in the middle of your job search, take a little bit of time and make sure that your LinkedIn profile matches your resume. Brian, any thoughts on that?
I agree 100%. And one more thing about LinkedIn. If you're going to include your LinkedIn handle, make sure, first of all, that you're active on LinkedIn, that there's something to find. Because if there's nothing to find, you're dormant. What's the point of including a link to something that doesn't add any value, right? The second thing is, go to your profile and edit your LinkedIn handle, because the default one will be potentially Adam Cincos. So linkedin.com/in/Adam Cincos 123584. That doesn't look right. So you can edit as long as you have, I believe it is something like 500 connections or something like that. If you're a power user or someone who has been active enough, you will be able to edit that handle. Make sure that handle is professional, right? It represents you, Adam Cincos or Adam Cincos1, whatever, right? And the other thing is your email address. Never neglect your email address. My very best friend, his email address was serialkiller@gmail.com. I'm like, don't apply with serial killer. I'm not giving you the exact email address, but
we're gonna Google
I'm not kidding you. serialkiller@gmail.com. Okay, don't apply with that. Okay, so he came up with another.
You don't want to be pantydropper123@gmail.com. You got to work on that, guys.
He came up with another email address, which was just as bad. It wasn't his name. Like, come up with something close to your name, right? Adam.Cincos, Adam_Cincos, Adam Cincos1, whatever it is. But don't do serialkiller@gmail.com.
So that's awesome. And Brian, this is invaluable advice. Certainly appreciate it. And I know we only have a few minutes here, but Adam, let's just do a real quick kind of analysis on your approach on LinkedIn for job searching. Are you connecting with the right people? Are you doing the right research? Are you reaching out to not just hiring managers at companies, but people in those positions that you're aiming for at companies to try to get informational with them? What's your approach on LinkedIn to your job search? Let's just hit on that for like 2 minutes.
Yeah, so I do spend a lot of time actually reaching out to people within the company, within those roles, and making the genuine connection. And usually it's around a message that, hey, I'm interested in a role at a similar role at your company. I'd love to hear what your favorite things are about working for. Is usually how I start that off. And what I find is about 50% of the time I get a decent response back that at least opens the door and starts a conversation, which I usually taking to my normal LinkedIn strategy, try and turn it into a phone call at some point in time as well, just to understand, and actually have that conversation with them and put a voice to it, because that, I think, builds better relationships overall.
That's awesome. Brian, any last thoughts here on Adam's resume, Adam's job search? Any tips, words of wisdom, advice, mantras, chakras, whatever you want to call it?
Since Adam is your guest invite, Adam, whenever you finish with applying my ATS resume template, feel free to send it to me. I will take a look and I will give you any extra feedback that can help you stand out from anybody else.
I appreciate that. Thank you so much.
Pleasure.
Generous. Adam Sinkus, thanks for joining us today. I appreciate you, man, and being a fan of the show. We'll talk soon. Take care.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Cool. It's so funny. So when you remove a guest, it says kick guest off. I mean, I think they could take a nicer approach to how they position that stream here. Maybe remove guest or ask guest. Brian, I think what you're doing is fantastic on the platform. I like your approach to things. I understand how you're trying to monetize it as well, because that's what we're doing here. So if you could help people, it's a great story. If you can make money doing it, and ultimately, when you have knowledge to share, don't keep it all inside. Give it out to people. And if it works, it works. And I appreciate it. Any last thoughts? Why don't you tell people who don't know how they could find you, how they could get more information on your services, on the ATS template? And I will link everybody as well when I drop the replay in here.
For anybody who's interested, if this resonated with you, if you are struggling, if you need any help, if you need someone to just listen to you, just come onto my profile, Brian Golod. I've made it so that it is open right now. I paid $800 and some about a week or so ago, so that anybody can contact me, because I have 13,000 people waiting for me to accept. Unfortunately, LinkedIn doesn't allow me to accept connections beyond 30,000. When someone disconnects from me, I can accept a new one, or when I delete someone, I can accept a new one. I'm not in the game of using people and just getting rid of people. It just doesn't feel right. It doesn't feel right to use people, to bring in more people. I don't want to do that. So if you want to talk to me, my profile is open right now. I want to see how this month goes, because it's a lot of money, and this is a 1 month trial. If I can help a lot of people, great, I will keep it and I will invest in you. If it doesn't do anything for me, and if I cannot empower and inspire other people, then what's the point, right? I'm going to just cancel.
I completely agree. So Brian, keep doing what you're doing. I appreciate you for making the time today. I know it's tight on your side. I'm glad that we had a chance to do this. I will send you the link. I'm actually going to post it up on Vimeo or YouTube, and I'll send you the link, and you could use it for any training or anything else that you want. And to everyone watching, everyone, thanks for coming on board. Thanks for joining us on the podcast live. I'll be back on Wednesday at noon with Jordan Paris and Hala Taha, and we are going to talk about podcasting 101 and 201. We're going to do a little bit of a masterclass on everything podcasting. Follow along at thepodcast.com. You know where to find Brian. I'll link him as well. And to everyone watching at home, remember, take your online, offline. Have a great week, and let this March be your best month so far. Take care, everybody. Thanks, Brian. I appreciate you, man.
Thank you. You too.
And we're